All right. Welcome to the Mr. Excel podcast for Thursday, December 22nd, 2005. I'm Bill Jelen. Today we have what sounds like a simple question and ends up being insanely hard. But let's walk through it. I got a call from my friend Dave, and Dave says we have a worksheet, 20 different worksheets, thousands of data points on each worksheet, and we want to have a formula. But every time we want to change this formula, we want to change it in one place and not have to go copy and paste to all 20 worksheets. Well, this should be relatively easy to do using a named range, and instead of assigning the range to a cell, we can assign it to a formula. But as I actually sat down to try and walk through this with Dave, it just became insanely hard, although we did eventually get it at the end. Even if you don't need to do this, follow along because you're going to learn some cool functions along the way. All right, so on this particular worksheet, we have the formula that Dave wanted to set up. He wanted to take the cosine of A2 divided by the sine of B2. And again, it's always going to look 2 cells to the left divided by the sine of the cell, 1 cell to the left. So as I started to think about how we would set this up, I realized that we needed a way to indirectly refer to the cell 2 cells to the left of me. And there is a great function called INDIRECT. The INDIRECT function, and then as a parameter you put any sort of a text reference to a cell, and Excel will understand it. But because of a little bug, we found that we had to sum that cell before we took the cosine of it. So our first step of the formula is we're going to take the cosine of the sum of indirect of A2. Now this is only going to work for one particular cell. We need to find a way to represent A2 in our formula. So I'm going to go to the next worksheet. There's a couple of things that are going to be useful here. There is a great function called the row function. The row function basically just returns the row number of the current cell. And then there's also the column function. Column again refers to the column number. So column C is 3, D is 4, E is 5. And you're going to say, well, what good is that? It turns out that that's useful as parameters to the address function. If I enter the address function and ask for the row of A2 and the column of A2, it will return nicely for me the text of A2. Now in this case it's putting the dollar signs in, and that's okay, I can live with that. So now it's possible to take that formula and use it in our indirect, and so we end up with this horrible looking formula where we take the cosine of the sum of indirect, the address, the row of that cell divided by the column of that cell. Now we're halfway there, but at this point, I was able to basically copy the formula, Control C, put the divide sign, put in paste, and now this time when I edit, we want to look at B2 and B2 and change the cosine to a sine. All right, and there's our original formula again. Now, remember the whole point of this is that we want to assign that formula to a named range. So I'm going to copy the formula, Control C, escape, and when we go to the Insert Name Define box, set up a name called Global Formula, and in the refers to, we actually copy that whole formula. Would click Add and OK, and now Global Formula is defined to be that horrible formula. So the advantage is, in my data set, instead of putting the whole big long formula, I can just simply enter equal global formula, and Excel will do the math for me. We get the same answer here as we did in the first step. Now the beautiful thing is in Dave's department, as they want to change the formula, they can now go through and redefine the name, which of course isn't that easy, but still, it'll be easier than doing thousands of copies on 20 different worksheets to change the name once and have it apply to the whole worksheet. So, very complicated tip today. We learned how to use named formulas, define a name and assign it to a formula, but when we actually got into doing that, we learned that we had to use the indirect function and then a combination of the address function with row function and column function to figure out exactly which cell we wanted to refer to. There you have it. I promise tomorrow's tip will be easier, so stop back. Thanks for joining us. We'll see you tomorrow.